Will you release the witness statements, Prime Minister?
Not a lone voice asking, but a chorus from across the opposition benches.
Is your government guilty of a cover-up, Prime Minister?
The accusation: did his ministers or advisers have anything to do with the collapsed trial of parliamentary researcher Christopher Cash and his friend Christopher Berry? Both men accused of spying for China between December 2021 and February 2023. Alleged crimes both men have always denied. But last month, the case collapsed. The Director of Public Prosecutions says because the government failed to provide sufficient evidence that China was a threat to national security.
Prime Minister.
The government says not only did they provide what they could, now they'll let us all see it too.
I'm deeply disappointed by the outcome. We wanted to see prosecutions. Last night, the Crown Prosecution Service clarified that, in their view, the decision whether to publish the witness statements of the DSNA is for the government. I have therefore carefully considered this question this morning, and after legal advice, I have decided to publish the witness statements.
So case statements provided by the Deputy National Security Advisor will be put into the public domain. For the opposition, they say this is a case of incompetency and weak foreign policy.
He's blaming his civil servants. He's blaming the media. He's blaming the last government. He cannot explain why he could not see this case through. He should have seen this case through. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, about what has happened. A serious case involving national security has collapsed because this government is too weak to stand up to China.
The case did not proceed because the policy of the past government did not meet the test that was necessary. That is the long and the short of it.
In February 2023, Christopher Berry returned to the UK from China for a holiday, where he was detained at the border and had digital media devices seized. A month later, Berry and his old friend Christopher Cash, who was working for Tory MP Alicia Kearns, were both arrested, and a year later charged with passing sensitive information on 34 separate occasions to a Chinese spy. Then a change of government. And since then, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson, said the Crown Prosecution Service asked over many months for the government for further evidence, essentially labelling China a threat. But the evidence never materialised, so 1 month ago, prosecutors dropped the charges against Cash and Berry.
Successive governments have been so keen to take Chinese money that they failed to spot China's sleight of hand.
That was the view of the Intelligence and Security Committee 2 years ago. But Keir Starmer argues no form of formal declaration of China's threat followed by the Tory government of the time.
All of these alleged crimes took place while you were still in government. Didn't you drop the ball here?
Well, the issue in this case isn't about formal designations. We don't have a list of countries that we designate as enemies.
The CPS seem to think that's the issue.
Well, what the CPS need is evidence showing that, as a matter of fact, China was a threat to national security at that time, and I'm pretty clear, as a matter of fact, it was.
We've had Tory former minister after former minister saying, look, I said during this speech that China is a threat. So therefore, isn't China a threat? Doesn't that count?
Well, it may seem that these statements, that looking at them in the round, the reasonable observer may conclude that. But you still have this problem that the legal test here appears to require something much more stringent, and until the Official Secrets Act is changed to clarify what appears to be a loop, you have this problem that statements made in other contexts just aren't enough.
For the Prime Minister, this is a case of alleged events before his time in office. For his opponents, it has morphed, and what's now on trial is his policy towards China and what's shaping it: national security or the glimmer of economic benefit.
So 7 hours on, we still haven't had publication. What we're expecting is 3 statements from the Deputy National Security Advisor. 1 statement from December 2023, when the Conservatives were still in charge, and then 2 from this year. Now, barring any surprises, it's unlikely actually that their publication will draw a line under this, because the central allegation isn't that the government toned down any evidence, but perhaps they could have provided more and chose not to. Now, the government say that is not the case, but the publication of any statements may not shed any more light on that key question.
Or McNamara. Well, the former Conservative Party leader and ex-Work and Pension Secretary, Sir Iain Duncan Smith, is in Westminster. He led calls for the UK to have a far more robust policy over the threat China poses to its security. Good evening. Time and time again, you called for the last government and this government to stop calling China an epoch-defining challenge and call it a threat. Did you understand why they weren't doing that?
Well, the reason I carried out that argument, I'm sanctioned, as you may know, by the Chinese government, so I have a certain amount of skin in the game on this one. But yes, all the way through, I have always argued that China is a threat. I wanted this to be in a position where it was easy to recommend that, and that was the beginning of the FIRS scheme, which is the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, where the upper tier then is clear that you are a threat. The government introduced that. Late was about to do something about that, but they didn't. But the point about this case is it doesn't need a government statement that they're an enemy. That's getting very confusing. If you had a statement about somebody being an enemy, you'd be at war with them. The threat issue is right. And what they did have, and by the way, I had a private...
But it wasn't designated a threat, was it? That's the problem.
Yeah, well, no, I had
at the time of the offence.
Well, let me just explain this. I had a private meeting, because I was obviously one of the targets. I had a private meeting with MI5, with the security services, including the Home Office, and I asked them about the prosecution, and they said, it's perfectly okay, we will be able to prosecute and we will be able to get the charge done, because we have a very clear recognition that this is a threat and the present government sees it as a threat. And that is mostly taken from what happened in 22 and 23. The government integrated review is very clear. It says China poses an ongoing threat, and actually it went further to state that they consider them to be a dangerous and ongoing threat in the report. So that allowed the prosecution to take place. What has gone wrong is something has changed between that point and the point when the government was asked, finally, as the case goes through, to restate that they were a threat then and they remain a threat now.
Well, if
the
it's as
government
clear as
didn't
you're
put that
saying
through.
That the integrated review had made it clear, then the CPS wouldn't have needed the government to come forward with another statement. I mean, what are you arguing that the government should have said that it didn't say?
No, there was a case that happened in between times on this old bit of legislation, which basically ended up by them having to say a final statement about where they were before the full prosecution case went through. And that changed the terms. Normally it would have been enough for the first statement straight through. This one required a second statement, but in the meantime, government has changed. And for whatever reason, and I suspect it's because, my personal view, the government really wasn't very keen to get the wrong side of China as they're trying to build this, give them this embassy. They want a trade arrangement. This is not what they want. So all they had to do was not provide the CPS with what they were asking for, and in due course, they must have known the case would fall. And it's quite interesting because the government's statement throughout this, and they've ducked and dived over this, was that no minister, no advisor was privy to what was going on.
Yeah, Prime Minister was very clear on that.
Yes. Well, actually, the Sunday Times published a very well-researched story which showed that there was a private meeting that took place in which all those sort of people, including Jonathan Powell, were at that meeting, and it was discussed there. So they would have known what was going on. Now, the government, first of all, has said nothing about it.
The Prime Minister was very clear in the House today, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't on that.
When asked, are you really saying all of those people weren't involved? And he said yes.
No, he said specifically when he was asked about the story in the Sunday Times, he then started cavilling around it, not denying it, not saying it was wrong. He actually left it. Oh, well, I'll have to go and have a look at that, he said. Well, I'm told
there's a good chance this is going to blow up in the Conservative Party's face as well.
No. This isn't about what the Conservative Party
we'll
did
see
or
the
didn't
statements
do.
soon, and it'll be up for lawyers to basically, work out whether it was enough or not. Well, and if the assessment was based on the previous government's position at the time of the alleged offence, I mean, it's Kemi Badenoch who's going to look stupid.
No, it's a law that has now changed. That's what makes this slightly complex. There isn't that law anymore. There's an easier law to prosecute people on. It doesn't require any threats or enemies. What this isn't going to blow up in the Conservatives' face. The Conservative position was very clear because that's when they launched the prosecution. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't therefore believe that what was said was robust enough to take this through. It's changed in the meantime because there was another case. So the government was asked to restate the view that they were a threat at the time and they remain a threat. And this is where they haven't gone. And they're now saying it wasn't a minister, no minister took part, and yet we know now suddenly the Prime Minister knew about what was going in 2 days before the eventual submission. Why didn't he intervene on that and say, look, this doesn't cover where we are? He keeps saying crocodile tears about, I'm so sad there wasn't a prosecution, but he had the chance at that point to say, no, 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 I don't agree this is right. And when they're told no, only civil servants could do that, he's the Prime Minister. He bears ultimate responsibility, so that gives him the right to intervene. And everything else is just subterfuge.
Sir Ian Duncan Smith, thank you very much.
Pleasure.